Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Matthew 24, verses 42 to 44. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore, be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. I feel like this is a scripture that keeps getting overlooked in second coming circles. A lot of people are trying to put together timelines and restrict how soon the second coming can happen. But I feel like you have to work this into it. The Lord himself said that he's going to come at a time that we think not. Even though we know that we'll be able to discern the signs of the times, we'll know that it's getting close, but we won't know exactly when. But it's like a woman that's about to give birth. You know that it's going to happen soon, probably within the next, 24, 48 hours, something like that. But you don't know exactly when. So on the one side, we know that it's getting close. On the other side, he's going to come at a time that we're not thinking about. And when you click on the footnote here, it makes it a little bit more clear. It says, when you do not expect him. So I don't know what that time is going to look like. Some people think it's going to be really big and obvious. These big, huge things are going to be going on. I'm not so sure about that. I kind of feel like when things quiet down, that's when it's going to happen. And that these big things that you're expecting will be taking place, but in a different way than what you expected. So, with that being said, I read this scripture because I just saw this article. This is the church's newsroom website. Temple Square renovation update, May 2025. The renovation of the historic Salt Lake Temple continues to reach new milestones. One of the most significant achievements is the tensioning of vertical strands inside columns that now extend from the tops of the temple's northeast towers down through the newly built foundations. These cables, when tensioned, will compress the tower and wall stones of the temple to further reinforce them. Now, this is the interesting part right here. This work marks the final phase of the temple's seismic upgrade, the largest part of the renovation. On this article, this is Church News. It also points out that this is the part of the final phase. It's the largest part of the renovation. And I can't help but to think, as part of these timelines that people put together, a lot of the time it'll include the Salt Lake Temple, that the second coming, whichever appearance, is not going to happen until the Salt Lake Temple is completed. So we can all breathe a sigh of relief and feel like we're okay because he's not going to come. At least his final appearance isn't going to happen until the Salt Lake Temple is completed. And I'm not so sure about that. I feel like a lot of people will take comfort in those kind of things, people that aren't quite ready, people that are dreading the second coming for whatever reason, maybe because they're not spiritually ready, maybe because they're worried about how the second coming will impact their materialistic lifestyle, whatever they have going on right now in life that is good for them. I don't know, but I feel like this would be a prime time for something to happen, to test if you really are listening to the brethren, if you really are listening to President Nelson, if you really are taking him seriously when he says that now is the time to prepare. So in a recent video, in fact, in a couple recent videos, we talked about the big earthquake that's expected along the Wasatch Front. There's that earthquake that I grew up hearing about. I lived and grew in Salt Lake, and there's always talk about the big one. And there was a recent study, which is what I made the video about, from SciTech Daily, talking about the earthquake, or not just the big earthquake, but earthquakes in general along the Wasatch Fault are more dangerous than previously believed. There was a new study that was done, and it had to do with observing or measuring the angle of where, I guess, like the plates slip or the fault or however it works out. The angle is such that it makes the situation more dangerous, and the rocks are smoother, which makes them more slippery. And so whenever you do have earthquakes that occur in this area, we now know it's more dangerous than before this year. So I covered that. I also did a video right after that looking at the June issue of the Liahona. And to my surprise, it had 7 different articles in it that were about natural disasters and war. And most of them talked about earthquakes. So let me put this together, okay? So we just found out that an earthquake along the Wasatch Fault is going to be more dangerous than previously thought. This month's Liahona had all these stories about disasters, natural calamities, and warfare and such. Okay, danger. And now, the most recent thing that I'm covering is you have this final phase of the Salt Lake Temple's seismic upgrade that is taking place right now. So, if there was a limiting factor to when the big earthquake would happen, whether it's an earthquake along the Wasatch Front or whether we're talking about the big earthquake when Christ comes to the Jews on the Mount of Olives, either one of those, if there was a limiting factor, this might be it right here. Now that this is being completed, even though the temple is not rededicated yet, this might be the red zone that we're in. Think about this. Let's go to my spreadsheet called Timeline Phrases. If you're new to the channel, using BYU's Scripture Citation Index, you can search words and phrases in General Conference talks going back to 1942. And I've simply tallied up the number of talks that include these words and phrases by year. And for the term final phase, you can see that there's been a spike ever since 2020. Interestingly, that was the same year that there was the earthquake in the Salt Lake Valley that caused the angel Moroni on top of the Salt Lake Temple to drop his trumpet. Okay? Final phase. When you go back in time, you don't find it in any other general conference going back to 1942. It's not there. Final phase starts showing up in 2020, 3 times in 2024. None so far for 2025. We'll have to see what's said in the October General Conference. But I do think that it is the final phase for a few different things. For the second coming in general, and with this article, the final phase of the temple's seismic upgrade. We should probably pay attention to that. So I just wanted to point that out. Let's see, was there anything else? Oh yeah. I have a couple quotes I just want to review again. I covered this in the earthquake video, but we're on my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. This is currently row 482 for Russell M. Nelson, Earthquakes and Global Pandemics. It's interesting to note that in his October 1993 General Conference talk, he brought up earthquakes right here. And then the next paragraph, he talked about a global pandemic, referring to a spiritual global pandemic. And coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, he would later become president of the church and then deal with an actual global pandemic that shut down temples worldwide, restricted missionary work, and so forth. And under his presidency, he's the one that's working on the Salt Lake Temple to get it ready for a big earthquake. So that was 1993. Oh, I'm just realizing this right now. So this was 100 years from the time that the Salt Lake Temple was dedicated in April of 1893. 100 years later, President Nelson is talking about earthquakes and a global pandemic. And then later he becomes the president of the church of the global pandemic period in the Salt Lake Temple renovation. Okay, this quote from, this is the October 2020 General Conference, Embrace the Future with Faith. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but, well, no, yeah, I will. Now, grandeur may not be the word you would choose to describe these past few months. How are we to deal with both the somber prophecies and the glorious pronouncements about our day? The Lord told us how with simple but stunning reassurance. If ye are prepared, ye shall not fear. What a promise. It is one that can literally change the way we see the future. I recently heard a woman of deep testimony admit that the pandemic, combined with an earthquake in the Salt Lake Valley, had helped her realize she was not as prepared as she thought she was. When I asked her whether she was referring to her food storage or her testimony, she smiled and said, yes. If preparing is our key to embracing this dispensation and our future with faith, how can we best prepare? For decades, the Lord's prophets have urged us to store food, water, and financial reserves for a time of need. The current pandemic has reinforced the wisdom of that counsel. I urge you to take steps to be temporarily prepared, but I'm even more concerned about your spiritual and emotional preparation. In that regard, we can learn a lot from Captain Moroni, who, in angel form and as a statue on the Salt Lake Temple just 7 months before, dropped his trumpet because of an earthquake. I think that President Nelson had that on his mind and decided to include this in his talk for those that have eyes to see, ears to hear. In that regard, we can learn a lot from Captain Moroni. As commander of the Nephite armies, he faced opposing forces that were stronger, greater in number, and meaner. So Moroni prepared his people in 3 essential ways. First, he helped them create areas where they would be safe, places of security, quote unquote, he called them. Second, he prepared the minds of the people to be faithful unto the Lord. And third, he never stopped preparing his people, physically or spiritually. And then we have this one that everybody knows. This is from the October 2021 General Conference. I may have the names. Oh gosh, I may have the wrong name. I'll have to go back and fix that. Okay, October 2021 General Conference. My dear brothers and sisters, I'm just reading the red highlighted part. My dear brothers and sisters, when renovations on the Salt Lake Temple are completed, there will be no safer place during an earthquake in the Salt Lake Valley than inside that temple. So we have a prophet that's been talking about earthquakes. In fact, in 1993, 100 years after the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple. And again, we're now in the final phase of the seismic upgrade. For all we know, maybe the earthquake's gonna happen now. Maybe it's gonna happen within the next 6 months, year, sometime before the rededication. That would be pretty eye-opening if that happened. Anyway, okay. And then lastly, I just want to tack on this last little bit here. We're going to shift gears. I just wanted to point out that Elder Cook was recently in an interfaith meeting or a couple meetings in the United Kingdom. And I'm taking note of this because he had contact with a Jewish rabbi. Well, I can't remember if he was a rabbi or not. Let me see. No, yeah, he is a rabbi. I'm taking note of this because I have this spreadsheet called Prophets Travel. And initially, I was just keeping track of any time that a prophet, apostle, general authority, whoever has made contact with the Jews. Initially, I was just tracking any time that they went to Israel. But then I wanted to track any time that they have any significant contact with Jewish people. And then I added on visits to Missouri, which I think I'm going to keep on here. I may change that in the future and just have this be Israel and Jewish people. But this is my newest one. Okay. Let's zoom in really quick. So the last one that I had was actually from a year ago, where Elder Anderson met with Rabbi Ariel Stoffenmacher in Argentina. The last apostle that I know of that has gone to Israel was Elder Uchtdorf in 2023. And then you can see the rest of this. You can access my spreadsheets anytime. The link is in the description box of each video. I do want to point out, though, that I'm going to do this. Quentin L. Cook. Okay, so we have Elder Quentin L. Cook on here 5 times. This year, 2022, he went to Israel in 2019. and then in 2016. Is that all of them? Yeah. So Elder Cook has been having a lot of contact with the Jews. I think this is important to note because I think people are expecting the two witnesses to literally be two prophets, two apostles that are in the streets in the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem, wearing robes, giving street sermons and stuff like that. And we know that the second coming is not even close because we haven't seen them doing that for 3.5 years. I feel like it's symbolic. I feel like I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But I feel like all these prophets and apostles that have been going to Israel and also that have had contact with Jews throughout the world, I think that there's a ministry going on that isn't so obvious. And it's multiple witnesses. Okay. Anyway, I could say more about that, but that's not the point of this video. But you get where I'm going with that. So, Quentin L. Cook. One thing that's interesting to point out before we go to the article is I have this quote from Elder Jeffrey R. Holland. At the time, he was he wasn't the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, but he was in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. This is from a church news article called History, Powerful Doctrines, and Ancient Beliefs Connect Jewish and Latter-day Saint Faiths, Elder Holland says. And here's the quote. He says, I have been the church's principal contact with the Jewish community for just over 40 years, and it has been one of the sweetest associations in my life. Now, that's kind of an interesting number, 40 years. But anyway, I don't know if that role is maybe passing on to Elder Cook, because again, he's having a lot of contact with Jews, it seems. But I just want to point that out. Let me read my highlights here. In London, on May 28th, Elder Cook joined senior leaders from a wide range of faith traditions at the Coptic Orthodox Church, where they were hosted by His Eminence Anba Angelos, the first Coptic Orthodox Archbishop of London. The discussion centered on FORB. What did that stand for? I think it's freedom of religion. Let's go find it again. Forgot about that. Freedom of religion or belief. Okay, FORB. Have you ever heard of that term before, the acronym? Okay, FORB. Not only as fundamental human right, but as a pressing humanitarian concern that intersects with issues of conflict, displacement, and social division. Okay, so here's a picture. Here's Elder Cook, and here's the rabbi right here. Okay, so this is what I'm mostly taking note of. Elder Cook shared insights on the sacred nature of religious liberty and called for greater civility in the public sphere. He said, quote, "It is important we learn to disagree better. We need to learn to talk with each other and not have the kind of anger that exists. Religious entities play an important role in setting that tone and encouraging respectful conversations. I think that could make a real difference," end quote. So this goes along with all this emphasis lately by President Nelson about being peacemakers and avoiding contention. And you guys, I would like to make a special request. Whenever I do videos about another faith, whether it's Community of Christ or whether it's the Church of Christ Temple Lot, or whether I'm talking to Adam from Israel, he's Jewish, or anything like that, please be respectful. Unfortunately, some people have left comments that embarrass me. I would hope that they would embarrass you, because my guests or people from other churches watch my videos. It's not just us. And they see those comments and it reflects on the church. So please be careful the way, whether it's my channel or other channels, if it has to do with some other faith, whether it's faith or just anybody, even if it's a celebrity, just when we talk about other people or other groups, we should be careful, we should be peacemakers, and we should express love, even if we don't agree with their beliefs or politics or whatever the case may be. So please be aware of that, please. Okay, so down here it says the gathering included, and it has all these people. And then the one that I'm interested in is Rabbi, I think it's Elkanan Feldman, deputy to the chief rabbi. Now, with as much as I've learned about Judaism, I'm not exactly sure if this would be like the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom or something like that. I know that there's a chief rabbi in Israel, but I think it's just for Israel. I don't think it's like worldwide. They don't have like a centralized structure like our church does. So I'm not sure. I'm not going to look it up, but if you're interested, maybe that's something you can look up and let me know in the comments. So, okay. Well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.